Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast is all about English listening practice, and our topic is why you can't understand native English speakers. Have you ever found yourself smiling and nodding in an English conversation, maybe a little too enthusiastically, only to realize, wait, I missed the punchline, or perhaps even worse, the entire point of what was being said? If so, you are certainly not alone in that experience. It happens.
Oh, definitely. That's a feeling many language learners know well. English listening, especially for non-native speakers, can frequently feel like trying to catch a butterfly in a windstorm. It's exciting, absolutely, because you're connecting, but it can also be quite chaotic. This is particularly true given the language's, remarkable mix of diverse accents, the constant evolution of slang, the sheer speed of some speakers, and those cultural quirks that pop up. It's a truly dynamic, sometimes bewildering environment to listen in.
Couldn't agree more. Today, we're embarking on a real deep dive into precisely why listening in English can feel so challenging. We'll look at what's truly happening in those tricky moments where your brain might just freeze up a bit. And most importantly, how you can conquer these hurdles to feel genuinely confident in any English-speaking situation. Think of this as your personal roadmap to turning your ears into veritable superheroes. So, let's kick things off with what is arguably one of the most common listening challenges. Wrestling with diverse accents and pronunciation. You know that feeling, right? Why, for instance, does a Scottish brogue or maybe a South African lilt sometimes seem like a completely different language, even if you've diligently been practicing with, say, standard American English? It can be quite disorienting.
It's a really insightful observation. Accents, by their very nature, introduce unique pronunciation patterns, distinct intonation, and sometimes even specific vocabulary that can be unfamiliar. But it goes deeper than that. English has certain sounds, we call them phonemes, that simply aren't present in many other languages. Take the th sound, for example, as in think or this, or those subtle yet crucial vowel differences, like between ship and sheep. Your brain, quite naturally, might not even register these sounds if they are entirely unfamiliar to its auditory processing system. It's a matter of, acoustic novelty. Your brain is kind of designed to filter out what it considers irrelevant based on your native language.
That's fascinating. So when you say your brain might not even register these sounds, does that mean our brains literally don't even hear certain English sounds if they're not in our native language? Or just that they struggle to distinguish them? Sounds like more than just not hearing them enough.
That's a powerful distinction to make. It's often a bit of both, really, but with a significant emphasis on the brain's filtering process. See, when we learn our first language, our brain becomes incredibly efficient at recognizing and prioritizing the sounds relevant to that language. Think of it like building a very specialized filter. Sounds that don't exist in your native tongue are often literally, filtered out before they even reach conscious awareness. For instance, in Spanish, there's no tigo sound. So a Spanish speaker's brain is highly adept at processing other sounds, but might initially just ignore or misinterpret the th as something else, maybe an s or an f. It's not that they can't physically hear it, but their auditory system isn't really wired to give it the same importance or distinction. This is why phonemic differences are so challenging. Your brain is accustomed to certain auditory patterns, and anything outside that familiar range requires active rewiring, creating new neural pathways to truly perceive accurately.
Okay. That explains why simply hearing the sound isn't always enough. Our brains need to learn to process it differently. And it's not just about individual sounds, is it? You mentioned intonation earlier, the rhythm and melody of speech. That must play a huge role too. How does that make accents tricky?
You're spot on. That brings us right to intonation and stress patterns. English relies heavily on where you place stress in a word, or how your voice rises and falls, to convey meaning and emotion. It's fundamental. A rising tone at the end of a sentence typically signals a question, right? While a falling tone usually indicates a statement. Pretty standard. But accents can significantly vary these patterns. Imagine a British speaker who uses a different melodic contour for a statement that might sound like a question to an American ear, or vice versa. This can lead to considerable confusion for a non-native listener trying to figure out the intended meaning because they're naturally relying on their own language's intonation rules. Their brain might process the words correctly, but completely misinterpret the implied message because the melodic cues are unfamiliar.
Right, so even if you perfectly understand every single word, the way they're said can still completely throw you off. And I suppose different regions also have their own special words, don't they? Things you wouldn't find in a standard dictionary.
They absolutely do. This is where cultural and regional vocabulary becomes a significant hurdle. An accent isn't just about sound, It's often a package deal. It includes unique words and phrases that are deeply embedded in the local linguistic tapestry. For example, a lorry in the UK is a truck in the US. Or arvo means afternoon down in Australia. If you're not familiar with these specific terms, they can create immediate communication gaps, making you feel like you've missed a vital piece of the puzzle, even if the surrounding words are perfectly clear.
Makes sense. It's like learning multiple layers at once. So what's the antidote? How do we actually fine-tune our ears to adapt to this rich tapestry of sounds and phrases? What can people do?
Well, the most powerful solution is really to immerse yourself in accent diversity, strategically leveraging technology. Don't just pick one show or one YouTube channel and stick with it. Actively seek out and expose yourself to a wide variety of English accents. Watch television shows from different English-speaking regions. For example, The Great British Bake Off for British English, Stranger Things for American, maybe Kath and Kim for Australian, or Dairy Girls for those great Irish accents. Beyond structured shows, YouTube is an absolute goldmine. Search for vloggers or content creators from the UK, the US, Canada, India, South Africa, Jamaica. The list goes on. The more varied exposure you get, the more your brain will naturally adapt to their unique sounds and rhythms. It's about building up a mental library of auditory patterns, so your brain stops filtering them out and starts recognizing them as meaningful variations.
And subtitles must be a huge help here, kind of a secret weapon, especially at the start when it feels overwhelming.
Indeed. They really are. This leads right into leveraging subtitled content and focused repetition. Watching videos with English subtitles is incredibly beneficial. It creates a direct link between the spoken words and their written forms. This helps your brain pick up on subtle pronunciation quirks and understand how sounds correspond to spelling. A good strategy is to start with subtitles on, just to build familiarity. Then gradually challenge yourself to turn them off as you get more comfortable. Most streaming platforms offer this now. Pair this with practicing minimal pairs. These are words that differ by just one sound, like bat versus bed, or pin versus pen, or the classic think versus sink. Engaging with these types of exercises specifically trains your ear to discern those subtle but important sound differences that your native language might have taught your brain to ignore. It's like recalibrating your auditory filter, really.
That sounds like a powerful combination. So it's not just about passively listening, but actively training your ear to notice those small differences. And building muscle memory for both listening and speaking must be important too, for truly internalizing these sounds.
It's absolutely vital. That's where shadowing native speakers comes in. Shadowing is a remarkably powerful technique. Basically, you listen to a short audio clip, say 10 to 15 seconds, and then you mimic it exactly. This means copying the accent, the rhythm, the tone, precisely as you hear it. For example, you could repeat a line from Harry Potter to practice British English, or maybe a scene from The Office for American English. This practice builds not just listening comprehension, but also the muscle memory for producing those sounds, which, interestingly, reinforces your auditory perception. When your mouth learns to make the sound, your ear becomes much better at recognizing it when you hear others use it. It's a feedback loop.
I can see how actively trying to produce the sounds would help you distinguish them when you hear them. It's like your mouth teaches your ear. Makes sense.
Exactly. It creates that very helpful feedback loop. And to really hone in on those subtle shifts in melody and rhythm, listen actively for patterns. When you encounter a new accent, try to focus on its overall melody and rhythm rather than getting caught up on every single unfamiliar word right away. Ask yourself, does it sound sharp or soft? Is the pace generally fast or slow? Where do they tend to place the stress in words or sentences? For instance, Australian English often uses uptalk, which is that rising tone at the end of sentences, making statements sound a bit like questions to some people. Noticing these broader patterns helps your brain adapt more quickly and efficiently. It's like training your ear to recognize the signature tune of an accent, even before you catch every single word.
Okay, let's imagine this in a real-life scenario. Picture yourself binge-watching Peaky Blinders, that fantastic British show known for its thick Birmingham accents. It can be tough at first.
Oh, initially, it can feel like a completely different language, absolutely. Tommy Shelby's pronunciation of "all right" instead of "all right" and the frequent use of "mate" can certainly throw you off balance. However, if you strategically use subtitles, you'll begin to notice specific patterns. For example, how "going to" often sounds more like "goin' to," or how "in it" is used frequently as a tag question.
Right, you start picking up those little things, and then what happens? Is there like a breakthrough moment?
That's where the magic of consistent practice comes in, really. After just a few episodes, if you try rewatching a scene without the subtitles, you'll likely find yourself catching more and more. Your brain starts to internalize the rhythm and the specific phonetic shifts, creating those new neural pathways we talked about earlier. Soon enough, you're following the rapid-fire dialogue like a seasoned pro, understanding not just the words, but the very cadence of the Birmingham dialect. That right there is the transformative power of consistent immersion and active pattern recognition. It really works.
It's incredible how our brains can adapt and pick up on those nuances with targeted effort. And accents are so much more than just sounds, aren't they? You mentioned culture earlier. They seem deeply tied to identity, telling a story about a person's background.
They absolutely are. Accents are deeply tied to identity and culture, carrying a wealth of social information. For instance, in the UK, a Cockney accent, known for its rhyming slang and maybe glottal stops, where the T sound is often omitted, might immediately signify a working-class Londoner from the East End, reflecting centuries of local history and community. In contrast, received pronunciation, or RP, is often associated with more formal settings, maybe educational institutions, or a more traditional, perhaps upper-class background. It's even deliberately taught for clarity in broadcasting sometimes. In the United States, a Southern drawl can evoke a sense of warmth and hospitality, often linked to a slower pace of life, but it can also, unfortunately, be stereotyped in less flattering ways sometimes. Understanding these cultural nuances isn't just academic. It helps you anticipate vocabulary, tone, and even social context when you're listening. It adds layers of meaning beyond the literal words you hear.
That's a really important layer. So we have some great insights and strategies now. How about a step-by-step practice plan for our listeners to follow? Something concrete to really tackle accents.
Yeah, a structured approach is always beneficial. Okay, for week 1, maybe dedicate 20 minutes daily to watching a British show, something like Downton Abbey with the subtitles on. During each session, make a specific note of, say, 5 new words or pronunciations that you encounter. Pay special attention to how sounds you might typically filter out are actually being pronounced.
Okay, week 1, British focus with subtitles, and then building on that, maybe pushing a little further.
Right. For week 2, switch it up. Go for an American show, something like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and intentionally reduce your subtitle use to maybe 50% of the time. The goal here is to actively focus on catching common contractions like gonna or wanna, and noticing how words blend together in faster, more natural speech patterns. This forces your brain to work a bit harder at processing the connected sounds without the constant visual aid.
Makes sense. What about tackling some of those tougher, more distinct accents after getting comfortable with American or British?
Good question. In week 3, try an Australian podcast, for example, maybe All Aussie Mystery Hour, and challenge yourself to listen entirely without subtitles. When you encounter challenging parts, and you probably will, don't hesitate to pause and replay them multiple times. Really try to identify the sounds and the flow. This active re-listening is crucial for auditory training. It's not passive.
Okay, active re-listening. And to really round it out, maybe mixing things up and testing comprehension across different styles.
Exactly. For week 4, aim to mix accents. Watch a YouTube video featuring multiple speakers, perhaps a panel discussion with British, American, and Australian guests all talking together. The ultimate test here is to try and summarize the main points afterward. This really checks your comprehension across varied speaking styles and puts your superhero ears to the test in a more complex environment.
That sounds like a solid, progressive plan for making our ears truly adaptable. And here's a pro tip. When starting this journey, where should someone actually begin with accents to maximize their success and avoid getting discouraged early on?
That's a great point. Start with accents that are somewhat similar to what you already know or are most familiar with. If you're quite comfortable with American English, for example, then Canadian English might be a natural next step. It shares many similarities, but also has its own delightful quirks, like how some Canadians pronounce out slightly differently. Once you feel comfortable with those, then you can gradually begin to tackle the tougher, more phonetically distinct accents, like Scottish, Irish, or maybe Jamaican patois. It's about building confidence and those neural pathways step by step, rather than overwhelming your system by jumping into the most difficult one first.
That's smart. Definitely don't jump straight into the deep end. Okay, moving on to our next common problem, something that can throw us off even when the accent itself is familiar. The sheer speed of native English speakers. Does it sometimes feel like they're speed rapping their way through a conversation? You know, phrases like, I'm gonna go become like one sound, I'm gonna go, or what you doing becomes what you doing. It can be incredibly disorienting, making you feel like you're always one step behind.
Oh, it's a very real phenomenon. And what you're describing is essentially connected speech, which is a fundamental hallmark of fluent natural English, where words just flow together smoothly. In this process, smaller, less important words like and, to, or of are frequently reduced to short, unstressed sounds. They almost disappear sometimes. This challenge is further complicated by factors like background noise in real situations, maybe a lack of topic context making it harder to predict, or even ellipsis, where speakers omit words that are understood anyway, just for efficiency. Your brain is trying to parse individual words based on how you learned them, but what it's actually getting is this continuous stream of blended sounds. It's a mismatch.
So why exactly does our brain struggle so much with this rapid-fire delivery? What's going on behind the scenes that makes it so hard to catch everything when people speak quickly?
Well, a significant reason is connected speech itself, as I mentioned. Words simply merge together, creating a continuous flow of sound rather than clearly distinct units. For example, what are you? Naturally transforms into something like what I. This is just a natural efficiency in spoken languages. Language speakers aren't trying to trick you, they're just being efficient with their articulation. But it poses a significant hurdle for learners who are expecting each word to be clearly pronounced and separate. Your brain has to actively segment these blended sounds back into recognizable words, and that takes effort and specific training.
Right. And those little seemingly insignificant words like to or and, they seem to just vanish sometimes.
They often do, through what linguists call weak forms. Small common function words like and, to, of, a, the are frequently reduced to very short, unstressed sounds. For instance, and might sound like a quick N sound, like in rock and roll. If you're specifically listening for the full dictionary pronunciation of these words, the strong form, you will often miss them entirely in natural, fast speech. Your brain is trying to match a strong form expectation to a weak form reality, and that mismatch can cause confusion and definitely slow down your processing speed.
And real-life situations are rarely quiet and perfectly calm, which surely can't help when you're trying to decipher fast speech.
Oh, absolutely not. Background noise is a huge factor. Real-life settings are rarely pristine audio environments. Conversations often happen in cafes with clattering cups, on busy streets with traffic noise, or in crowded rooms with multiple conversations happening. This ambient noise makes it inherently more difficult to pick out individual words from the auditory stream. Your brain has to work even harder just to filter out the irrelevant sounds and focus on the speaker's voice, which consumes valuable cognitive resources needed for comprehension itself.
And if you're not familiar with the topic being discussed, I imagine it must be even harder to keep up with the speed.
That's exactly where lack of context comes in. When the topic being discussed is unfamiliar, your brain has to work significantly harder to process the information and infer meaning. This makes you much more susceptible to missing specific words or even entire phrases, simply because you lack the predictive framework that context provides. When you have a strong context, say, the conversation is about cooking, your brain can predict upcoming words like ingredients or recipe, effectively filling in the blanks, even if some sounds are missed or reduced. Without that context, every word is a new puzzle to solve.
Okay, so it's a combination of things making it tough. How do we tackle this particular problem of lightning fast speech then? How can we train our ears to catch those rapidly delivered words and those tricky reductions?
Well, a foundational step is to start with slower audio, then gradually build up your speed tolerance. Begin with content that is specifically designed for English learners, maybe like ESL Pod or BBC Learning English's 6-Minute English. These resources intentionally use clear, slower speech. This allows you to build your confidence and accustom your ear to common patterns before you attempt to tackle faster, more natural conversations. It's like starting with lighter weights at the gym. Once you're comfortable, you can then gradually increase the speed, maybe using tools like Audacity or VLC Media Player. They often have features that let you slow down audio or video playback without distorting the pitch too much. You can start at 0.8x speed and work your way up.
Okay, starting slow makes sense. Then what about those tricky blended sounds we talked about earlier, like gonna and wanna? How do we specifically target those?
Absolutely. The next crucial step is to decipher connected speech patterns through active study and also mimicry. Dedicate some time to studying common reductions like go to, go into, wanna, don't know, woulda, what'ya, what are you, or shoulda, should have. Many excellent YouTube channels like English with Lucy or Rachel's English provide really detailed breakdowns of these connected speech phenomena with lots of examples. But don't just listen passively. Practice dictation. This is really key. Listen to short clips, maybe just 5 to 10 seconds long, and then try to write down exactly what you hear, word for word. Afterward, compare your written version to the actual transcript. This rigorous exercise significantly sharpens your ability to catch fast speech and trains your ear to notice subtle reductions and elisions, those drop sounds. Apps like LingQ or Audible often include transcripts, making them ideal for this kind of focused practice. The act of writing forces your brain to process every single sound segment.
I can definitely see how that would force your brain to focus intensely. And when we're actually in a conversation, instead of desperately trying to catch every single word, what should our focus really be? Is there a better strategy?
Yes, that's a key cognitive shift to make. Practice active listening for gist. This means changing your focus from trying to catch every single syllable to understanding the main ideas or the overall message. If someone says, "I'm going to get you coffee," you don't need to perfectly hear every single sound to grasp the overall message they're going to get coffee. Focus on the core meaning, rather than getting bogged down by individual sounds you might miss. Your brain will eventually learn to fill in the gaps as you get more experienced. And to really cement this, utilize audio with transcripts. Listen to longer clips, TED Talks, audiobooks, YouTube videos, while simultaneously following along with their transcripts. This allows you to pause and replay sections to observe exactly how words blend together in natural speech. Websites like lyricstraining.com are excellent for this too, letting you practice with song lyrics, which is a fun way to catch fast speech and its reductions in a musical context.
That's a great way to bridge the gap between what we think we should hear and what's actually being said. So let's put this into a real-life context again. Imagine watching a scene from Friends where Ross and Rachel are having one of their classic lightning-fast arguments. Ross yells, "We were on a break," but it sounds like one word, "We're on a break."
That's a perfect classic example, isn't it? By initially turning on the subtitles, you immediately notice how "ona" blends together smoothly into "ona" and how the K sound in break might be somewhat clipped or less pronounced at the end. You start to see the visual representation of how those sounds merge. After rewatching that very scene a few times, maybe focusing just on that line, your brain starts to pick up these patterns without needing the subtitles anymore. Suddenly, you're not just hearing a jumble of noise, you're hearing "we're on a break" as a fluid, understandable phrase. Soon enough, you're following their rapid banter like a seasoned pro, because your brain has learned to segment the connected speech into meaningful chunks. It becomes automatic.
It's truly remarkable how that pattern recognition kicks in with practice. And fast speech, much like accents, must have cultural links too, right? It's not just random, is it? There are reasons people speak quickly or use reductions.
It certainly does. Fast speech is often tied to context and personality, and reflects underlying social norms and conventions. In casual settings, for example, Americans commonly use reductions like "gonna" or "wanna," partly because it sounds more relaxed and informal. It's a marker of the casual register, and signals an informal social context is appropriate. British English, on the other hand, might feature more dropped consonants, such as "going" instead of "going," or dropping the H sound in words like "have," which is also often a mark of informality or regional dialect. Understanding these ingrained cultural habits helps you anticipate common reductions and stay on track with the conversation. It's about more than just the words. It's about the social register they imply, and your brain uses these cues to predict what's coming next, even if individual sounds get swallowed.
That adds another layer to listening. Okay, so what's a good step-by-step practice plan for this specific challenge, building on what we just discussed, to really get our superhero ears used to the speed of natural English?
Okay, a practical approach could start in week 1 by listening to a slow-paced podcast, maybe like ESL Pod, for about 15 minutes each day. While listening, actively try to note down at least 3 reduced forms you hear, like "gonna" or "wanna" or "hafta." This builds your foundational recognition of these common forms in slower speech first.
Okay, slow and steady first, and then for a bit more speed and maybe some active repetition.
Right. In week 2, switch to a faster-paced sitcom. Perhaps The Big Bang Theory, they talk pretty fast sometimes, but keep the subtitles on for support. Make it a point to pause every 5 minutes or so and actively repeat a sentence that you found challenging to catch or understand fully. This trains your vocal muscles alongside your listening, reinforcing that connection between sound and production.
Right, linking speaking and listening. Then, for a true challenge of raw comprehension without the visual crutch.
For week 3, try watching a YouTube vlog, maybe a travel vlog by someone like Fun for Louise, with absolutely no subtitles at all.
After each segment, maybe pause and try to summarize the main points you understood. This is a great way to test your overall comprehension without relying on visual text, pushing your brain to process purely auditory input at a natural speed.
Okay, testing pure listening. And for that crucial real-time application, like in an actual conversation.
Yeah, in week 4, maybe join a language exchange on an app like Tandem or HelloTalk. Crucially, ask your partner to speak naturally without consciously slowing down for you. If you get their permission first, it can be really helpful to record the conversation. Later, you can review it specifically to spot those connected speech patterns and reductions that you might have missed entirely in the moment. This helps you bridge the gap between prepared content and spontaneous, unpredictable conversation.
That sounds like a really practical final step. Now, here's a pro tip for this problem. You mentioned the dictation method earlier. Can you explain again why it's so effective specifically for training your ear to handle fast speech?
The dictation method is incredibly powerful for this specific challenge because it forces extreme attention to detail. It's quite demanding, but very effective. You listen to a very short segment of audio, maybe just 10 seconds, from your favorite show or podcast. Then, you physically write down every single word you hear, as accurately as possible. Include the ums and uhs if you hear them. Afterward, you compare your written version to the actual transcript. This exercise forces you to pay incredibly close attention to every sound, every reduction, every blend, every pause. Over time, you'll become much more adept at picking out those reduced forms and fast speech patterns that often go unnoticed during more casual listening. It essentially trains your ear to dissect the sound stream meticulously.
That sounds like a rigorous but highly effective way to train your ear for detail. Okay, so once our ears are a bit more attuned to different speeds and accents, we hit another potential hurdle that can truly trip us up. Those tricky vocabulary gaps and bewildering idioms. The ones that don't make any sense if you take them literally. Have you ever heard "it's raining cats and dogs" and actually imagined animals falling from the sky? Or maybe "I'm over the moon" and wondered about lunar connections? It can be truly perplexing, leaving you feeling entirely out of the loop.
Oh, definitely. English is indeed brimming with idioms, slang, and words that often take on very context-dependent meanings. It's a rich tapestry, but it can be confusing. Vocabulary gaps can lead you to miss enormous chunks of a conversation, especially when specialized terms or cultural references are used that you just haven't encountered before. But it's not just about not knowing the word itself. Even knowing a basic dictionary definition doesn't always help with real-world usage. For example, the simple verb run can mean so many different things. To physically run a race, to run a business, to run out of time, or even to run into a friend unexpectedly. The context is absolutely everything, and without it, the intended meaning can be elusive. Your superhero ears might hear the sounds perfectly, but your brain can't assign the correct meaning without that context.
Right. So why exactly do these vocabulary and idiom struggles occur so often? Why do these words and phrases sometimes feel like secret codes that only native speakers know?
Well, a core reason is simply limited vocabulary and those tricky context-dependent meanings. If you haven't been exposed to certain words or phrases, your brain simply won't recognize them, even if they are spoken with perfect clarity. It's like trying to understand a code without the key. Compounding this, many English words, and especially phrasal verbs, think turn up for arrive, or give in for surrender, or look after for take care of, have meanings that are not literal at all. Their meaning is entirely derived from the surrounding situation and the ongoing conversation. This requires a deeper level of understanding beyond a simple word-for-word translation, challenging your brain to think flexibly about how words are used in different situations.
And idioms are a particularly tricky area, aren't they? They often feel like inside jokes you're not privy to.
They're extremely tricky, precisely because they're so deeply embedded in cultural nuances and specific references. Idioms are often connected to cultural references, historical events, or shared knowledge that might not resonate if you're from a different cultural background. For example, the phrase "spill the tea," which means to share gossip, emerged relatively recently from American drag culture and gained widespread popularity through social media. Someone completely unfamiliar with that origin would certainly be confused by the literal image. Your brain needs not just the linguistic data, but often the cultural backstory to truly get the idiom.
And when you hear an unfamiliar word or idiom, it can be almost paralyzing, right? Making you miss what comes next because you're stuck on that one confusing phrase.
It absolutely can. This indeed leads to cognitive overwhelm. When you encounter an unfamiliar word or phrase, your brain can kind of freeze for a moment as it tries to process and figure out the new information. It searches its database and finds nothing. This momentary mental pause, this bottleneck, can cause you to miss subsequent information, creating a compounding effect where you fall further and further behind in the conversation. It's frustrating.
Definitely. So what are the best ways to bridge these vocabulary gaps and master those sometimes bewildering idioms? How can we equip our superhero ears to decode them effectively?
Well, a very effective strategy is to build topic-specific vocabulary and learn idioms in context. Don't just learn random words. If you know you'll be listening to conversations on particular subjects, say business, technology, sports, or maybe travel, then actively study the key terms associated with those areas. For business, you might learn words like pitch, merger, revenue, or ROI. Flashcard apps like Quizlet or Anki are excellent tools for creating customized sets to memorize new words, often with audio pronunciation included. Then, when it comes to idioms, instead of simply memorizing a long list of idioms and their definitions out of context, try to learn them through stories, examples, or seeing them used in real-life situations. Websites such as usingenglish.com or theidioms.com provide extensive lists with clear explanations and sample sentences. For example, you might learn, "My old car finally kicked the bucket," to understand that kick the bucket means to die or stop working. Context makes them stick and gives your brain the necessary framework for understanding.
That sounds much more effective than just rote memorization, which often doesn't stick. So it's really about seeing how words are used in their natural habitat, so to speak.
It's vital. This leads directly to engaging with authentic contextual content. TV shows like Friends or The Office, movies, podcasts, and YouTube videos are fantastic resources because they show you how words and phrases are naturally used in real-life scenarios, complete with tone and situation. When you encounter an unfamiliar phrase while watching or listening, note it down and then look it up. This active engagement helps solidify your understanding by showing your brain the word in action. And importantly, when you encounter a new word in conversation, practice guessing from context. Don't panic and shut down. Instead, use the surrounding words, the speaker's tone, and the overall situation to make an educated guess about its meaning. For example, if someone sounds utterly exhausted after a long day and says, "I'm completely beat," you can reasonably infer that beat in this context means extremely tired, even if you've never heard that specific usage before. Your superhero ears can often infer meaning even without prior explicit knowledge, if you give them a chance.
That's a great skill to develop the art of informed guessing. It must get easier with practice. And for long-term retention of all this new vocabulary and these idioms we're learning, how do we make sure they stick?
For long-term retention and the ability to actually use them yourself, active recall, keep a vocabulary journal and engage in real conversations. Whenever you hear a new word, idiom, or useful phrase during your listening practice, jot it down in a dedicated notebook or a digital app like Notion or Evernote. Make sure to look up its meaning, its correct pronunciation, maybe note the phonetics or link to an audio clip, and find or write an example of its usage in a sentence. Then, commit to reviewing these entries regularly, maybe weekly. Complement this systematic learning with engaging in real conversations. Utilize language exchange platforms such as Pandem or HelloTalk. These platforms connect you with native speakers who can provide real-time explanations for idioms and slang as they naturally come up in conversation. And crucially, don't be afraid to ask for clarification. Asking "what does that mean?" is one of the best ways to get immediate, relevant context and learn effectively.
That active engagement seems key. Okay, let's imagine a scenario again. You're listening to a podcast, maybe about business, and the host says, "Okay, let's cut to the chase." You initially picture maybe a car chase scene from a movie, but then the conversation quickly shifts to the host getting directly to the main point without any further delay.
This is a perfect example of how context illuminates meaning. If you were confused and then checked the transcript or looked up the phrase, you'd learn that cut to the chase simply means to focus on the main issue or get to the most important part quickly. The next time you hear that phrase, maybe in a business meeting or another podcast, you'll nod confidently, knowing exactly what is being conveyed, all thanks to that initial contextual learning experience. Your brain has now built a stronger association between the phrase and its meaning, making retrieval much faster and easier.
It's amazing how much context helps unlock those phrases. And idioms, as you said earlier, often have deep cultural roots. Can you give us another example of how understanding that cultural origin makes them less mysterious and easier to remember?
Absolutely. Idioms often reflect deeper cultural values or historical narratives, and knowing that story can really help. For example, the idiom "raining cats and dogs" is quite strange, literally. One possible origin theory, though debated, is that it stems from 17th century England. Poor street drainage meant that heavy rains could sometimes wash deceased animals, sadly cats and dogs were common strays, into the gutters, creating a vivid, chaotic image associated with torrential rain. In complete contrast, spill the tea, meaning to share gossip, emerged much more recently from American drag culture and then gained widespread popularity through social media platforms. Understanding these different origins makes idioms feel far less mysterious and arbitrary. You're not just memorizing a random phrase, you're understanding a piece of cultural history or a contemporary social reference, which makes it infinitely more memorable and intuitive for your superhero brain to process.
That background really does help. Okay, how about a specific step-by-step practice plan for dealing with vocabulary and idioms to really power up our listening comprehension in this area?
Sure. For week 1, maybe watch a show known for its natural dialogue and idioms, like Friends. Make it a goal to note down 5 idioms or slang phrases per episode, things like hang out, freak out, get over it. Afterward, look them up and write your own example sentences to internalize their meaning and how they're typically used.
Okay, focusing on common slang and idioms first, and then maybe building vocabulary in areas we're interested in.
Exactly. In week 2, use an app like Quizlet or Plenty to create flashcards for, say, 20 new words that are related to a topic you're particularly interested in or need for work or study. Maybe travel terms like layover, jet lag, customs, or tech terms like bandwidth, interface, algorithm. Practice these daily, making sure to use the audio feature if available to hear the pronunciation and associate the sound directly with the meaning.
What about trying to actually use this new vocabulary in real conversation, even if it feels a little forced at first? Does that help listening?
It absolutely does. It reinforces the learning loop. For week 3, listen to a podcast designed for learners that often explains phrases like all ears English. Write down 3 new phrases or words you learn. Then, during your next language exchange chat on Tandem or Hello Talk, make a conscious effort to use those new phrases in a sentence. This active application is crucial for moving words from passive recognition, just understand them when you hear them, to active usage, which really solidifies them in your long-term memory and makes you notice them more when listening.
Right, using it helps you hear it better, and combining skills, like reading and listening together, to reinforce new vocabulary.
Yes, that's very effective. In week 4, try reading a short article from a reputable news source like BBC News or The Guardian, while simultaneously listening to its audio version if available. Some sites offer this. As you go, highlight any unfamiliar words and look them up immediately to see how they are used within their specific context in the article. This combines reading and listening, strengthening both skills and providing rich contextual clues for vocabulary acquisition.
That's a great multimodal approach. Now, here's a pro tip for vocabulary. With so many words to learn, where should we focus our efforts first to get the most, bang for our buck, the biggest improvement quickly?
That's a crucial question for efficiency. Focus on high-frequency words and phrases first. Don't try to learn obscure words right away. Phrasal verbs, for instance, like pick up, turn down, run into, figure out, look forward to, are incredibly common in everyday English conversations. They pop up absolutely everywhere. By prioritizing these common phrasal verbs and other high-frequency vocabulary, you'll quickly enhance your ability to catch more in natural conversation simply because you'll encounter them far more often. Resources like the book English Phrasal Verbs in Use or online lists on sites like EnglishPage.com can give you a significant head start, targeting the vocabulary your superhero ears will hear most frequently.
That's excellent practical advice. Focus on the common stuff first.
Okay, let's tackle common problem. #4now. Difficulty following conversations with multiple speakers. Listening to one person is challenging enough, but add a group chat, a lively podcast with several guests, or a fast-paced debate, and it can feel like utter chaos. With overlapping voices, constant interruptions, and quick topic shifts. It can make you feel completely overwhelmed and hopelessly lost.
It truly is a significant jump in complexity for your superhero ears, no doubt about it. You might find you can successfully catch what one speaker is saying, but then completely lose the thread when another person jumps in unexpectedly. Or you might just become confused about who is actually saying what, especially if voices sound similar. This particular challenge is especially pronounced in dynamic, real-time settings, such as work meetings, social gathering, or panel discussions, where the conversation can feel very much like a fast-paced ping-pong match with multiple balls in the air. Your brain is trying to sort through multiple simultaneous audio streams, which is an incredibly demanding cognitive task. So why is it so much harder to follow when more than one person is talking? What's happening in our brains specifically that causes this overload and confusion in group settings?
Well, several interacting factors are at play. First, and perhaps most obviously, there's overlapping speech and rapid topic shifts. In natural group conversations, it's very common for people to talk over each other slightly or interrupt one another, especially when they get excited or passionate. This makes it exceedingly difficult to isolate a single voice from the auditory mix and track what that specific person is saying. Compounding this, group discussions often transition abruptly from one subject to another without explicit warnings or clear segues. One minute you're talking about movies, the next politics, then food, all without a clear, okay, now let's talk about. Your brain has to constantly reorient itself, both to who is speaking now and what they're actually speaking about.
Right. And everyone has their own unique way of speaking, their speed, their accent, their word choices, which must make it even more complicated when you're trying to follow multiple people at once.
Exactly, they do. And that's the challenge of different speaking styles. Each individual speaker possesses their own unique pace, their own particular accent, as we discussed, and their own distinct vocabulary preferences and common phrases. For a listener, trying to process all these variations simultaneously, maybe a fast American speaker, a slower British speaker with different idioms, and someone else with a regional accent, can feel akin to juggling multiple languages at once. It demands significant mental agility just to keep track. This also contributes directly to cognitive overload. Your brain is already working incredibly hard just to process sounds, extract meaning, and apply grammatical rules in a second language when listening to one person. Adding multiple speakers simultaneously can easily push your cognitive capacity to its absolute limit, making it much harder to retain information or even keep track of who said what just moments before.
And if you're just listening to audio, like a podcast or on the phone, you miss out on all those helpful visual clues that native speakers often rely on subconsciously in face-to-face conversations.
That's a key point, definitely. The lack of visual cues. In audio-only content, such as podcasts, radio broadcasts, or phone calls, you cannot rely on body language, facial expressions, or gestures to help you follow the conversation's flow. These visual aids are incredibly important for native speakers in deciphering meaning, gauging reactions, and managing turn-taking. A raised hand signaling intent to speak, a nod showing agreement, or an eye roll conveying skepticism can communicate a lot without any words being spoken. Without them, your superhero ears are essentially flying blind, trying to navigate the social dynamics purely through sound.
Makes perfect sense. So how do we get better at navigating these tricky multi-speaker conversations? What are the practical solutions for training our ears and brains to thrive, or at least survive, in group settings?
Okay, the first step is usually to start with controlled group content, and then gradually introduce more complexity as you get comfortable. Begin by listening to podcasts or interviews that feature only 2 or 3 speakers. These formats are typically more structured, with clearer turn-taking, and thus much easier to follow than more chaotic group chats or free-flowing debates where everyone might talk at once. Good examples might include The Moth, often one narrator but sometimes features multiple voices, NPR's How I Built This, usually an interviewer and one main guest, or perhaps The Joe Rogan Experience, often one-on-one or with a small panel. Then, for deeper training, practice identifying speakers and conversation cues. Watch talk shows or panel discussions, preferably with subtitles initially. Shows like The Ellen Show, The Graham Norton Show, great for overlapping chat, or BBC's Question Time, more formal debate, are excellent for this. While watching, actively focus on matching the distinct voices to the speakers you see on screen, and consciously note their unique speaking styles, who speaks fast, who uses more formal language, etc. Additionally, pay close attention to phrases that typically signal either a new speaker taking the floor or a shift in the topic. Listen for things like, I agree, on the other hand, well, actually, let me jump in there, or going back to what you said earlier. Recognizing these linguistic cues helps you anticipate changes in the conversation's flow, much like a detective looking for clues to follow the trail.
So it's about not just listening to the words themselves, but listening to the structure and the flow of the conversation, the signals people use. And when we can see the speakers, like on TV or video calls, how should we use that visual information to our advantage?
When you're watching video content, absolutely use visual cues strategically. Pay careful attention to body language and facial expressions. A raised hand, a slight lean forward towards the microphone or another speaker, or even a sudden intake of breath, often signals that someone is about to speak or has something important to add. These visual anchors can significantly aid your comprehension, especially when the audio gets busy or multiple people start talking. Your superhero eyes can definitely assist your superhero ears. And for really pinpointing understanding in group settings, especially audio only, utilize podcasts with transcripts and practice dictation again, but this time focusing on group segments. Many excellent podcasts, like This American Life or Radiolab, provide full transcripts online. Listen along while reading. This allows you to visually track who is speaking and observe how the conversation naturally flows, including all its twists, turns, and interruptions. You can even highlight transition phrases or moments of overlap to accustom yourself to these features. Then, occasionally pause the audio during a group segment and try to dictate exactly what you heard, trying to separate the voices. This forces your brain to work hard at isolating individual speakers within a complex soundscape.
That makes perfect sense using all the tools available. So let's imagine a real-life application for this. Picture yourself at a language meetup, maybe online or in person, and 5 people are all enthusiastically discussing their favorite movies. One person is raving about Inception, another immediately jumps in talking about The Matrix, and then suddenly someone else starts ranting about how overpriced the popcorn is. It's overwhelming.
It certainly is a common experience, that feeling of being bombarded by different threads. But here's the thing. After you've strategically practiced with panel discussions, maybe watch some talk shows, and trained your ear to pick up on those subtle turn-taking cues and transition phrases, things like, that reminds me of, or, yeah, but I disagree because, you'll start to track the conversation much more effectively. You're no longer just hearing a jumble of voices. You're actively recognizing patterns and anticipating who might speak next, or when the topic might shift. Soon, you're not just following along passively. You find yourself confidently chiming in with your own movie picks, feeling like a genuine participant in the discussion. Your superhero ears have learned to filter and prioritize the incoming streams.
That's a huge leap forward from feeling lost to feeling engaged. And just like with accents and speed, group conversation norms must vary culturally too, don't they? It's not just linguistic, it's heavily social.
They absolutely do. Group conversation norms vary significantly across cultures, and this influences how people interact, how interruptions are perceived, and how you should interpret the contributions you hear. In the US, for instance, a slight interruption, especially in an informal setting, might sometimes be seen as a sign of enthusiastic participation or eagerness to build on someone's point, rather than necessarily being rude. Whereas in the UK, turn-taking often tends to be more structured, particularly in more formal settings, with perhaps less tolerance for direct interruption. Politeness might involve waiting for a clearer pause. Australians, on the other hand, might use humor or light teasing frequently within group chats to keep things lively and might jump in playfully more often. Recognizing these distinct cultural norms helps you anticipate the flow of conversation better and feel significantly less lost or confused by interactions that might seem abrupt or overly polite according to your own cultural background. Your superhero brain is learning the unspoken rules of the cultural dance.
That cultural context is so important. Okay, what's a step-by-step practice plan for this specific challenge to get our ears ready for the complexities of the group dynamic?
Okay, a great way to build this skill progressively is to start in week 1 by listening to a podcast like The Moth. It often features 2 or 3 distinct storytellers or voices within an episode. Use the provided transcript, if available, to help you identify each speaker and follow their main points. This controlled environment helps you practice differentiating voices and narratives without too much overlap.
Okay, starting simple with clear voices, and then maybe introducing more interaction and adding those visual cues back in.
Right. In week 2, switch to watching a talk show, maybe something like The Graham Norton Show, which is famous for its lively, overlapping chat between multiple guests. Watch it with subtitles initially. Pay close attention to how the guests interrupt each other, often playfully, or how they smoothly transition between topics, often prompted by the host. This provides real-world examples of dynamic group conversation, allowing you to link the sound patterns with the visual cues of who is speaking.
Okay, observing the dynamics. And for building up to actually participating in live practice, maybe in a smaller group first.
Yes, that's the next step. For week 3, join a small language exchange group, ideally with just 3 or 4 people, perhaps on apps like Tandem or HelloTalk, or a dedicated conversation club if you can find one. Your primary focus during these sessions should be on catching just one speaker's main point at a time. Don't try to follow everyone perfectly at first. This allows you to gradually practice processing multiple inputs in a lower pressure, more manageable environment.
Good advice. Focus on one at a time. Finally, for a real test of comprehension in a natural, often less structured group setting, like reality TV.
Exactly. In week 4, try watching a reality show like MasterChef or maybe Survivor without using subtitles. These shows often feature lots of natural, casual, overlapping group discussions and arguments. After watching a segment, challenge yourself to summarize the group discussion in a notebook, trying to recall who said what and what the main points of contention or agreement were. This pushes your comprehension skills in a natural, often messy environment, forcing your superhero ears to prioritize, categorize, and synthesize information from multiple sources.
That sounds like a good challenge. Now here's a pro tip for practicing with multiple speakers.
Yeah.
You suggested starting with the moth. Why is that a good starting point before diving into the real chaos of something like reality TV?
Right, start with the Moth podcast. The reason is that the storytellers on the Moth typically share well-structured personal narratives, and the transitions between different speakers or segments are usually quite clear and distinct. This makes it an excellent starting point for learning to differentiate and follow multiple voices without excessive overlap or interruption. Once you feel more confident with that format and your ears are warmed up to distinguishing voices, then gradually move on to messier conversations, like group vlogs on YouTube, reality TV shows, or even recordings of actual meetings, if appropriate. These more closely simulate the sometimes chaotic, unpredictable nature of real-life group discussions. It's like graduating from a controlled training environment with clear rules to the complex dynamics of the real battlefield.
That's a smart progression, building up complexity. Okay, next up, common problem, #5. Trouble understanding different contexts and tones. This feels subtle but crucial. English isn't just about the words themselves, is it? It's profoundly about how they're said. A sarcastic "oh great" can mean the precise opposite of what the words suggest, and a formal presentation sounds worlds apart from a casual chat over coffee. It's like a secret language within the language, isn't it? All about nuance.
It absolutely is a critical area, and often one of the most challenging for learners, precisely because it relies so heavily on subtle, nuance, and deep cultural understanding. It goes beyond grammar and vocabulary. Missing these crucial nuances, the underlying tone of voice, the specific social context, or the speaker's true purpose or emotion, can lead to significant misinterpretations or even complete confusion. For example, a boss saying, "let's touch base later," in a formal meeting carries a vastly different meaning and implication, it's a professional instruction, than a friend saying, "let's catch up over coffee," which is a casual invitation. The context and the expected tone fundamentally alter the message, and your superhero ears need to be trained to distinguish between these subtle, emotional, and social cues, not just the words.
Right. So why is it so hard sometimes to grasp these subtle differences in tone and context? Why do we miss the sarcasm or fail to pick up on the subtle hints people drop? What's happening there?
Well, one significant reason is dealing with unfamiliar contexts and also cultural differences in directness. If your primary exposure to English has been mainly through, say, academic textbooks or very formal news broadcasts, then encountering a casual pub conversation with its unique informal tone, slang, and faster pace can be quite jarring and confusing. For instance, a textbook might teach you the phrase, "I am very tired," but in a casual setting, a British friend might simply say, "I'm absolutely knackered." The tone, the vocabulary, the level of formality, they vary drastically between these contexts. Furthermore, some cultures value very direct language, whereas English speakers, depending on the region and situation, often use hints, understatements, sarcasm, or layers of politeness to soften their messages or convey humor. For example, a phrase like, "maybe we can try another approach," in a work setting might subtly imply, "this current approach isn't working well and you need to change it," without directly stating the criticism. Your brain isn't just translating words, it's trying to interpret this complex layer of cultural subtext and indirectness.
And pure emotion can be conveyed entirely through the sound of the voice, right? Without a single explicit word about feeling. It's amazing how much information is in the tone, but also confusing.
It's incredibly powerful, yes.
Yeah.
That's the realm of emotional nuances. Tone carries an immense amount of meaning in English, perhaps more than in some other languages. A rising intonation can unequivocally indicate a question or perhaps surprise. A flat, monotonous tone might convey boredom or indifference, and a sharp, clipped tone can signal frustration or anger. These auditory cues, the melody and rhythm of speech, are paramount to understanding the speaker's true feeling and underlying intent. Your superhero ears have to learn to listen beyond the literal words to the very emotion embedded in the sound of the voice. And if you only ever practice with one kind of content, such as only listening to scripted news broadcasts, which tend to be emotionally neutral, you simply lack exposure to this vast range of natural human emotional expression in English, making real-life conversations feel much more jarring and unpredictable.
And sometimes just a slight emphasis on a particular word can change the entire meaning of a sentence, right? Like if someone says, "I didn't say that," stressing the last word.
Indeed. These are the subtle signals like word stress or strategic pauses. English speakers frequently use stress or brief pauses to emphasize specific words, thereby altering the focus or meaning of a sentence entirely. Using your example, saying, "I didn't say that," clarifies a point by stressing that, implying maybe they said something else similar, but not that specific thing. Missing these subtle vocal cues, failing to notice where the emphasis falls, can lead to a complete misinterpretation of the intended message because your brain isn't picking up on the speaker's intended focus within the sentence. And humor, especially cultural humor and sarcasm, can be notoriously hard to pick up because it varies significantly by region and relies heavily on tone contradicting the literal words. British humor, for instance, often employs very dry, understated sarcasm, which can be quite difficult to detect. If you're not attuned to it, it might sound perfectly serious. American humor, in contrast, might sometimes be more direct, exaggerated, or reliant on specific cultural references. Recognizing these regional differences in humor style is crucial for accurate interpretation and avoiding awkward misunderstandings.
Definitely want to avoid awkward misunderstandings. So what are the best ways to tune into these subtle shifts in context and tone? How do we train our superhero ears to effectively read between the lines of what's being said?
Okay, the first step is really to explore diverse content genres and actively study body language when possible. Make a conscious effort to listen to a wide mix of English content. Formal speeches like TED Talks for their precise, measured tone, casual YouTube vlogs for everyday banter and informal language, sarcastic comedy shows to understand how humor and irony are conveyed vocally, and maybe emotional podcasts like TED Radio Hour or This American Life to grasp subtle emotional nuances in storytelling. This diverse exposure broadens your tonal palette significantly, and crucially, when you're watching videos, study body language. Pay close attention to facial expressions, gestures, posture. A raised eyebrow might very clearly signal sarcasm or gout, even if the words are positive. A genuine smile naturally indicates friendliness or agreement. Shows like The Office, both UK and US versions, are exceptionally good for this, as the characters' expressions often vividly reveal their true feelings, even when their words are deliberately ambiguous or understated. Your superhero eyes become a valuable aid to your superhero ears in decoding the full message.
That makes total sense. Our bodies often give away what our words try to hide. Are there specific phrases or expressions that signal a speaker's intent or tone that we should listen out for, like little verbal flags?
Absolutely, there are many. So learn pragmatic phrases and practice role-playing. Study those phrases that explicitly signal tone or intent. Things like, just kidding, obviously signals humor, I'm not going to lie. Often precedes a blunt or honest statement, or no offense, but is a classic way to preface a potentially critical comment in a softer manner. Resources like the website or app Fluent U have excellent videos explaining these kinds of pragmatic phrases within authentic contexts. Then, to actively practice applying this knowledge, practice role-playing. Imagine different conversational scenarios, maybe a formal job interview versus a casual friendly chat with a neighbor. Then listen to examples, or practice with a partner, focusing on how the exact same words or ideas might sound completely different based on the context and the speaker's intended tone. YouTube channels, like English Addict with Mr. Steve, sometimes offer role-play videos that can help you practice discerning these subtle tonal shifts. This trains your brain to expect and recognize different intonations in different social settings.
That sounds like a powerful way to simulate real-life situations and build awareness. Now, in a real conversation, if we're genuinely unsure about someone's tone, maybe they sounded sarcastic but we're not positive, is it ever okay to just ask for clarification? I know I sometimes worry about offending someone or looking stupid if I ask.
That's a common worry. But it's not just okay, it's often highly recommended, and rarely considered offensive in most English-speaking contexts. So definitely ask for clarification. In real-life conversations, never hesitate to politely ask something like, "Sorry, I wasn't sure if you meant that seriously," or "Could you explain what you meant by that phrase?" Native speakers generally appreciate the effort you're making to understand fully and will almost always be happy to clarify. It actually shows engagement and a desire for clear communication, not weakness. In fact, asking often prevents much more awkward misunderstandings down the line that could arise from misinterpreting tone. And for a bit of fun while learning about tone, watch comedy shows. Stand-up comedy specials on Netflix or YouTube by comedians like Hassan Minhaj, John Mulaney, Ali Wong, Trevor Noah. They are masters of tone. They use timing, pitch variation, pauses, and volume shifts masterfully to deliver their punchlines and convey attitude. Watching them actively trains your ear to pick up on these subtle nuances in vocal delivery in an entertaining way.
Comedy is a great suggestion. Okay, let's consider a real-life example. You're in a meeting, maybe presenting an idea, and a colleague says, "Wow, that's such a great idea," but their tone is completely flat. Maybe they even give a tiny eye roll. How does practice help here?
This is exactly where your practice pays off. After watching a few comedy clips, perhaps doing some role-playing, and generally tuning your ear to these tonal shifts, you'll start to notice these subtle signals much more easily. You'll observe that the words themselves are positive, great idea, but the delivery, the flat intonation, the lack of enthusiasm, the contradictory facial expression clearly suggests sarcasm or disagreement. The very next time you hear a similar comment, you'll likely pick up on the sarcasm immediately. Depending on the situation and your relationship with the colleague, you might choose to address it directly, perhaps with a witty, "Oh, I bet you just love it," or simply make a mental note of their actual opinion. Either way, you've correctly decoded the underlying message because your superhero ears detected the mismatch between words and tone.
That's a great example of how practice translates directly to better real-world comprehension and navigating social dynamics. And again, tone is so deeply rooted in culture, isn't it? It's not just an individual speaker's choice all the time.
It absolutely is. Tone often reflects broader cultural attitudes and communication styles. It's part of the unwritten rules of a society. For instance, in the UK, sarcasm and understatement are prevalent, especially in humor and even in everyday conversation. Think of how saying something is not bad can actually be high praise, or a bit of a bother could mean a major problem. That understatement is conveyed tonally. In the US, tone might sometimes be more overtly expressive, with more noticeable enthusiasm or exaggeration used to convey excitement, agreement, or positivity. Australians, meanwhile, often employ a playful, teasing tone, even affectionately in casual settings, which might be misinterpreted if you're not used to it. Recognizing these general cultural tendencies in tone is fundamental to interpreting meaning accurately and avoiding misunderstandings, because your superhero brain is learning not just the language, but the unspoken rules of communication within that specific culture.
That cultural awareness is key. Okay, what's a step-by-step practice plan specifically for mastering contexts and tones, making our ears truly sensitive to all that nuance?
Okay, for week 1, try watching a comedy special on Netflix or YouTube, maybe John Mulaney's Kid Gorgeous, or a similar stand-up act. As you watch, make a specific note of at least 3 instances where sarcasm or humor was used, and analyze exactly how the speaker's tone of voice changed the meaning of their literal words. This trains your ear to the specific vocal shifts involved.
Okay, focusing on humor and sarcasm first. And for understanding emotional tone in longer narratives, beyond just jokes.
Right. In week 2, listen to a podcast known for its emotional storytelling, like This American Life, or perhaps Radiolab. Focus specifically on identifying the speaker's emotions. Do they sound happy, sad, reflective, angry, confused? Based solely on their tone of voice, not just the words they use. Afterward, try to summarize one of the stories you heard in your own words, paying attention to the emotional arc conveyed through tone.
What about contrasting formal and informal tones directly, since they can be so drastically different in English?
Good idea. For week 3, watch a formal speech, maybe on TED.com, using subtitles if needed to follow the content. Pay close attention to the speaker's measured pace, formal vocabulary, and relatively controlled intonation. Then, immediately afterward, watch a casual YouTube blog. This direct contrast will help you clearly spot the significant differences in intonation patterns, pacing, word choice, slang versus formal, and overall energy between formal and informal contexts.
That contrast should make the differences really stand out. And finally, applying this in real-time interaction, putting our superhero ears to the test with a partner.
Yes, that's crucial. In week 4, join a language exchange on HelloTalk or Tandem. During your conversation, actively practice noticing your partner's tone. You could even make it a specific practice point. Ask your partner to intentionally use specific tones, maybe say something sarcastically, then excitedly, then neutrally, and you try to guess their true intent or emotion. This interactive practice is highly effective for building real-world tonal recognition skills and confidence in interpreting nuance.
That sounds like fun practice too. Now, here's a pro tip for this tricky problem. Where can we find really clear, maybe even exaggerated, examples of different tones to help us spot them more easily in the wild, in more subtle situations?
Watch stand-up comedy, as we mentioned, or well-acted sitcoms like The Office, either version, or Parks and Recreation. These shows often feature wonderfully exaggerated tones for comedic effect, and they provide very clear context, making it much easier to practice spotting sarcasm, feigned enthusiasm, frustration, or awkwardness. As you watch, try writing down 1 or 2 specific phrases or lines that you notice are conveyed with a particularly strong or interesting tone in each episode. Then, maybe even practice saying them yourself, trying to mimic that tone. This helps you internalize the sound and feel of those tonal nuances, making your superhero ears much sharper at detecting emotional subtext.
Excellent tip. Okay, moving on to common problem #6. Getting distracted or feeling overwhelmed during listening practice. Listening in English, especially for longer stretches, can sometimes feel like a real mental marathon. If your attention wanders, even for just a second, maybe to translate a word in your head, or you start daydreaming about lunch, you might miss crucial information. It's like your brain just hits a wall and can't keep up with the input.
This is an incredibly common issue, and it's particularly true when dealing with longer content like university lectures, business presentations, or podcasts that go on for an hour or more. It's almost like your brain is shouting, "Hold up, this is simply too much information coming in too fast." Tonal. The cognitive load, the sheer effort involved in processing a second language in real time, is significant, and distractions, both internal, your own thoughts, and external noise around you, can easily derail your comprehension. Your superhero ears might be technically receiving the sound waves, but they require a focused, unstressed mind to truly process complex input effectively.
So, why does our brain seem to hit that wall or lose focus so easily when listening in English for extended periods? What's going on internally that causes this mental exhaustion or tendency to zone out?
There are several key reasons. First, as I mentioned, is the sheer cognitive load. Processing sounds, attaching meanings, applying grammatical rules, understanding intonation, doing all of this simultaneously in a language that isn't your first is incredibly demanding and mentally exhausting. Think of it like trying to run too many complex applications on an old, slow computer eventually. Things are going to slow down, buffer, or even crash. Your brain is expending a lot of energy just keeping up. Compounding this psychological factor is often trying to understand everything perfectly. Many learners set an unrealistic goal of 100% comprehension from the start. This perfectionism paradoxically often leads to increased frustration and distraction when they inevitably miss a word or phrase. This pursuit of perfection can actually pull you out of the present moment of listening, creating a negative cycle of missed information, anxiety, and further distraction.
And our environment plays a huge role too, right? All those external stimuli constantly competing for our limited attention span.
Absolutely. External distractions are a major factor in the modern world. Background noise from traffic or a nearby conversation, visual stimuli like notifications popping up on your phone or computer screen, or even purely internal thoughts, perhaps worrying about dinner plans, replaying an earlier conversation, or making a mental to-do list can easily pull your focus away from the audio you're trying to process. Your superhero ears might be picking up the sounds accurately, but your brain's processing power is being diverted elsewhere. And crucially, this is also often about a simple lack of listening stamina. If you're not accustomed to sustained, focused listening sessions in English, your brain might simply check out or start to fatigue after just a few minutes. You might find yourself hearing the sounds but not retaining any meaning, lost in a kind of auditory fog. Your listening muscle, like any other cognitive skill, needs to be built up gradually through consistent practice.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like needing to train for that marathon. So, what are the best ways to combat distraction effectively and build that crucial listening stamina? How can we ensure our superhero ears stay focused and absorb information even during longer listening tasks?
Okay, the initial step is usually to build listening stamina gradually and shift your focus to key information. Start with very short audio clips, perhaps just 2 to 5 minutes in length, where you can maintain full focus. Then incrementally increase the duration week by week. Maybe aim for 7 minutes, then 10, then 15. Your ultimate goal should be to comfortably sustain active listening for 20 to 30 minutes without losing focus or feeling overwhelmed. Just like exercising a muscle, your listening stamina will strengthen with consistent, progressive practice. And rather than fixating on catching every single word, which causes stress, consciously train yourself to concentrate primarily on the main ideas or essential keywords. After listening to a segment, try to summarize the core content in just one simple sentence. This practice keeps your brain actively engaged in processing meaning and ensures you grasp the core message, even if you miss some minor details along the way. Prioritize comprehension over perfection.
That sounds like a much less stressful approach. Prioritizing the overall message and creating the right physical environment must be important too, especially when you're first starting to build that stamina.
It's crucial, yes. Minimize distractions as much as possible and take regular short breaks. Always try to listen in a quiet environment with as few visual or auditory distractions as possible, especially when you're doing focused practice. This might mean turning off notifications on your phone and computer, closing unnecessary browser tabs, finding a quiet room, and ideally using headphones to truly immerse yourself in the audio and help block out external noise. And for extended content, like listening to a long lecture or lengthy podcast episode, don't try to power through for an hour straight. Instead, plan to pause every 10 to 15 minutes. Use these short intervals, just a minute or two, to consciously process what you've just heard, maybe stretch and mentally recharge. Jotting down quick summaries or keywords during these breaks can also significantly reinforce comprehension and give your brain a chance to consolidate the information before moving on.
Taking breaks is smart. And what about training our minds themselves to stay present and focused? Maybe techniques from outside of language learning?
Yes, definitely. You could practice mindfulness techniques and use chunking strategies for the content itself. Even simple mindfulness exercises like focusing on your breath or intentionally bringing your attention back to the present moment whenever it wanders can significantly improve your overall attention span and reduce mental chatter. Try spending just 1 minute before your listening practice session to close your eyes and take a few slow, deep breaths. This simple act can prime your brain for better focus. And for managing lengthy audio content, consciously divide it into smaller, more manageable segments, say 5-minute chunks or logical sections based on topic changes. Then focus your energy on understanding the main point of each individual chunk before moving to the next. This chunking approach makes the overall task feel significantly less overwhelming and much more achievable, reducing the cognitive load on your superhero brain.
Chunking makes sense for big tasks. Okay, let's picture this scenario. You're listening intently to an interesting TED Talk about climate change. You're fully focused for the first 10 minutes, absorbing everything. But then, your mind suddenly drifts off to thinking about your weekend plans, and consequently, you miss a key statistic about carbon emissions. How does practice help prevent that drift?
That's a very common scenario, that mental drift. But by consistently practicing with short clips first, and then gradually increasing your listening time as we discussed, you will find that you can sustain your focus for much longer periods. You're essentially training your brain, strengthening those neural pathways responsible for attention and focus, making it better at resisting those internal distractions or bringing focus back more quickly when it does wander. Soon you'll find yourself catching the main ideas and even key details of a 20-minute talk without your mind zoning out nearly as often. It's a progressive skill that builds over time, much like building physical endurance. Your superhero ears become more resilient to mental fatigue.
And culturally, how might this idea of distraction and the expectation of focus play out in English-speaking environments? Are there differences in how multitasking is viewed?
That's an interesting point. In many English-speaking cultures, particularly perhaps in North America, there's often a high value placed on multitasking and efficiency, which ironically can sometimes contribute to more distractions during conversations. For instance, it might be more common in some casual US context for people to occasionally glance at their phones during a chat, whereas in some British contexts, maintaining consistent eye contact might be more emphasized as a signal of focus and respect. Being aware of these varying cultural norms regarding attention and multitasking can help you remain more engaged yourself and also help you interpret others' behavior more accurately. Maybe someone checking their phone isn't being rude, it's just a cultural habit. It helps manage expectations.
Good point about managing expectations. Okay, what's a step-by-step practice plan specifically for overcoming distraction and overwhelm to keep our superhero ears sharp and focused during listening?
Okay, for week 1, start small. Listen to a 5-minute clip from a resource like BBC Learning English. As you listen, take concise notes on just the main points. Importantly, if you find yourself feeling distracted, consciously pause the audio for a moment, acknowledge the distraction without judgment, and then gently bring your focus back to the audio.
Okay, acknowledging distraction, not fighting it, and then building on that, maybe adding a little controlled noise to the mix to simulate real life.
Exactly. In week 2, increase your listening time slightly, maybe to a 10-minute podcast like 6-Minute English, despite the name, they have longer ones too. Deliberately practice listening in a slightly noisy environment, perhaps with quiet music playing or sitting near a window with street sounds. This actively builds your ability to maintain focus amidst mild, controlled distractions, teaching your brain to filter out background noise more effectively.
What about breaking down longer content systematically to make it more digestible and less overwhelming?
Yes, using that chunking strategy. For week 3, choose a slightly longer piece, like a 15-minute TED Talk. Make it a point to pause the audio every 5 minutes. During each pause, quickly summarize what you've heard in that 5-minute segment in a notebook. This systematic chunking strategy helps manage cognitive load, prevents fatigue, and reinforces retention throughout the longer piece, keeping your superhero brain from getting bogged down.
Chunking a TED Talk, good idea. And for a final week, combining all these elements, longer duration, potential distractions, focused techniques for a complete challenge.
Right. In week 4, challenge yourself by watching a 20-minute YouTube vlog without any subtitles. Before you start, consciously use mindfulness techniques, like taking 3 deep breaths or setting an intention to stay focused, to ensure you begin with an attentive mindset. This acts as a culmination, testing your cultivated listening stamina and focus in a more demanding, natural context.
That sounds like a great final challenge for the week. Now, here's a pro tip for this problem. You mentioned the Pomodoro technique earlier. Can you explain how that specific time management method can be applied effectively to help with sustained listening focus?
The Pomodoro technique is highly effective for building focus and preventing burnout during any mentally demanding task, including listening practice. It's very simple. Apply it to your listening. Use a timer and listen intently to your chosen podcast or audiobook for a concentrated 25-minute period. No interruptions allowed during this time. Then, when the timer rings, take a mandatory 5-minute break. During the break, step away, maybe stretch, and briefly write down everything you understood from the 25-minute block. Afterward, reset the timer and repeat the cycle. This structured approach trains your brain to concentrate deeply for specific, manageable durations and improves your ability to recall information effectively. It breaks down a long listening session into manageable bursts, building your listening muscle without excessive strain.
The Pomodoro technique for listening. I like that. Okay, our final common problem, and perhaps one of the most significant because it really impacts all the others we've discussed. Lack of confidence or pervasive anxiety when listening. Listening isn't just about your ears functioning correctly, it's profoundly about your mindset. Feeling nervous, constantly worrying about understanding, or harboring a deep fear of failing or making mistakes can actually make it physically harder to process what you hear. It can lead to second-guessing yourself constantly, or even avoiding practice situations altogether. It's like your superhero ears are perfectly capable, but your superhero mind is holding them back with fear.
It's an incredibly powerful psychological barrier, and one that almost every language learner grapples with at some point. It's much like standing on a high diving board, as I said before, but being completely consumed by the worry that you'll perform a clumsy belly flop instead of trusting yourself to make a graceful dive. This pervasive fear of judgment or failure can, unfortunately, create a negative self-fulfilling prophecy, causing you to actually struggle more than you would if you were relaxed. Your anxiety becomes a constant internal distraction, hijacking your cognitive resources.
That makes sense. So what exactly fuels this lack of confidence or this listening anxiety when we're trying to understand English? What are the underlying fears or thought patterns that cause our minds to freeze up or panic?
Well, a primary driver is often the fear of missing out, FOMO, but specifically in conversations. The constant worry that you might miss something important, some crucial piece of information, or fail to understand a joke, can create a persistent stress loop. This anxiety then actively distracts you from the very act of listening, ironically causing you to miss even more as your focus shifts from the speaker to your own internal panic. Compounding this is often perfectionism. If you set an unrealistic expectation for yourself to understand absolutely everything perfectly 100% of the time right from the start, then any small mistake or missed detail can feel like an enormous failure. This unattainable standard sets you up for frequent disappointment and heightened anxiety, effectively paralyzing your superhero years with the fear of not being perfect.
And past negative experiences, maybe being laughed at or feeling embarrassed in a conversation, can really stick with us, making us hesitant to put ourselves out there again.
They absolutely can. Negative past experiences, such as previous misunderstandings that led to awkwardness, moments where you felt publicly embarrassed because you couldn't follow along, or maybe even criticism from others, can lead to significant hesitation and a deep reluctance to engage in further listening practice or spontaneous conversation. These memories create a strong mental block, making your brain anticipate failure before you even start. And this is particularly acute in high-stakes scenarios. Think about job interviews conducted in English, important academic presentations, or crucial social events where you feel pressure to perform well. In these situations, the perceived consequences of not understanding are much higher, which naturally amplifies anxiety and makes effective, calm listening even more challenging. It turns a difficult task into a potentially terrifying one.
Definitely. So how do we actively build that confidence muscle and overcome this pervasive anxiety when listening? How do we train our superhero mind to be as strong and resilient as our superhero ears need to be?
Okay, a crucial first shift in perspective is to reframe mistakes and start small. This is fundamental. Instead of viewing mistakes or moments of non-understanding as failures, consciously try to see them as invaluable learning opportunities. Understand that every time you miss something, you're actually identifying an area for improvement, getting one step closer to grasping it the next time. Make it a practice to actively note down one thing you learned from each mistake. to consciously shift your mindset from judgment to curiosity. Then, start small. Don't throw yourself into the most challenging listening situation right away. Practice your listening skills initially in low-pressure, low-stakes settings. This could be simply listening to a fun, engaging podcast on a topic you love, watching cartoons, or chatting casually with a supportive friend who knows you're learning and is patient. This approach allows you to build confidence organically without the overwhelming fear of judgment or negative consequences.
Reframing mistakes as learning, I like that. And I can definitely relate to that feeling of self-consciousness when I'm learning something new, constantly comparing myself. What about our internal monologue? How can we make that inner voice more supportive?
It's incredibly powerful, that inner voice. So actively use positive self-talk and deliberately join supportive communities. Make a conscious effort to replace negative self-criticism with positive affirmations. Regularly remind yourself with phrases such as, "It's okay if I don't understand everything. I can still get the general idea," or "I'm making progress every single day, even if it's slow," or "Asking for clarification is a sign of strength, not weakness." These small, consistent, positive internal messages can profoundly boost your mindset and make the entire learning process feel much more enjoyable and less daunting. Complement this internal work by joining supportive communities. Language exchange apps like Tandem or HelloTalk often connect you with patient and encouraging native speakers who are also learners themselves. Look for online forums, Discord servers, or local conversation groups specifically designed for learners. These platforms can create a safe and non-judgmental space where you can practice, experiment, and make mistakes without the fear of criticism, which is absolutely vital for overcoming self-consciousness and building real confidence.
Finding that safe space seems key. And celebrating those small victories along the way, even the really tiny ones, must help build momentum.
Absolutely vital for motivation. Celebrate your progress consistently and simulate those high-stakes scenarios in a safe way. Make a conscious effort to acknowledge and track your small wins. Did you understand a new idiom today? Did you follow a conversation for 5 minutes longer than last week? Did you bravely ask for clarification? Note these down. Use a journal, a habit tracker app like Habitica, or just tell a friend. Seeing your tangible progress, no matter how small, can be a huge confidence booster over time. Then, to specifically address the fear associated with those high-pressure situations like interviews, simulate high-stakes scenarios in advance. Practice role-playing job interviews, formal presentations, or difficult conversations with a language partner, a friend, or ideally a tutor. Platforms like Preply or italki allow you to book sessions with tutors who can specifically simulate these types of scenarios in a supportive environment, helping you build composure, practice useful phrases, and gain confidence under pressure before you face the real thing. Your superhero mind gets battle-tested safely.
That's a really practical way to prepare for stressful situations. And simple relaxation techniques can also help manage that physical feeling of nervous energy before or during listening, right?
They can be surprisingly effective, yes. Use relaxation techniques regularly and practice visualization. Before a listening practice session, or even before entering a potentially challenging conversation, try simple relaxation exercises, like taking several slow, deep breaths, consciously relaxing your shoulders, or doing a brief 1-minute body scan meditation. Apps like Calm or Headspace offer guided exercises that can help calm your nerves, reduce physical tension, and significantly improve your focus. Make it a habit. And for mental preparation, visualize success. Before engaging in a conversation or a significant listening task that makes you nervous, take a moment to vividly imagine yourself understanding clearly, feeling calm, and responding confidently. This mental rehearsal, visualizing a positive outcome, can significantly reduce pre-performance anxiety and actually prime your brain for success. You're telling your superhero mind, you've got this.
Visualizing success. I like that. Okay, let's put this into a real-life scenario again. You're at a coffee shop with friends and someone uses a slang term you don't know, maybe spilled the tea. You don't quite catch it, and you feel that familiar momentary pang of anxiety. Your stomach drops, you feel yourself blush. What happens next if you apply these confidence strategies?
Okay, so instead of letting that anxiety overwhelm you, causing your mind to freeze or making you withdraw from the conversation silently, you take a deep breath. You remember that asking is okay. So you bravely decide to ask, maybe smiling. Wait, sorry, what does that phrase, spill the tea, mean? I haven't heard that one before. Your friends, understanding you're learning and likely happy to share, cheerfully explain that it's about sharing gossip or interesting news. You laugh it off, maybe thank them. And because you took that courageous step instead of hiding, you're soon back in the flow, confidently asking other questions when needed and staying fully engaged in the conversation, even when you occasionally miss something. That's the power of embracing the learning process, managing the anxiety, and allowing your superhero mind to ask for help when needed. It keeps you in the game.
That's a fantastic way to handle it, turning anxiety into a learning moment. And culturally, how do native English speakers generally react when learners do ask for clarification? Is it actually seen as a sign of effort, as you suggested, or more as a nuisance or interruption?
Generally speaking, in most mainstream English-speaking cultures, like the US, UK, Canada, Australia, there's a strong value placed on clear communication and often an openness about the learning process. Native speakers are usually quite happy, even willing, to explain phrases, repeat themselves, or slow down their speech if you ask them politely and show you're making an effort. Phrases like, "Could you repeat that, please?" Or, "Sorry, I'm still learning English. Could you clarify what you meant by phrase?" are widely seen as signs of effort and genuine engagement, not as weaknesses or annoyances. In fact, asking for clarification often facilitates a better, more connected conversation, as the speaker then knows you're genuinely trying to understand them accurately. So your superhero mind can generally be at ease knowing it's not only okay, but often appreciated to ask for help.
That's really reassuring to hear. Okay, so what's a final step-by-step practice plan specifically for building confidence and reducing listening anxiety? How can we make our superhero mind fully on board with supporting our superhero ears?
Okay, for week 1, focus on positive reinforcement. Listen to a fun, relatively easy podcast, maybe like The English We Speak from the BBC, for about 10 minutes daily. After each session, make a point of writing down just one specific thing that you understood well. This practice helps build your confidence by deliberately focusing on your successes and reinforcing positive listening outcomes.
Focusing on the positive, good start, and then putting ourselves out there just a little bit, practicing that crucial act of asking for help in a low-stakes way.
Exactly. In week 2, join a language exchange on Tandem or a similar app for just a short 10-minute chat. Make it your specific goal for that chat to practice saying phrases like, "Can you say that again, please?" Or, "Could you speak a little slower?" At least once if you genuinely miss something. This helps you get comfortable with the act of asking for clarification, making it a more natural and less scary part of your communication toolkit.
Okay, practicing asking, what about tackling those more pressure-filled scenarios head-on, but in the safe way, to build that mental resilience?
Right. For week 3, try role-playing a situation that typically causes you anxiety, like a job interview or maybe making a complaint on the phone with a friend, a language partner, or a tutor on a platform like Preply. Your focus during this role-play shouldn't be on perfection, but specifically on practicing staying calm under perceived pressure, and most importantly, on asking for clarification clearly and confidently whenever it's genuinely needed. This helps desensitize you to the stress of these high-stakes situations through controlled exposure.
Desensitization through practice makes sense. And finally, how can we really see how far we've come and concretely celebrate our progress to keep motivation high?
This is a great final step. In week 4, record yourself summarizing, out loud, a 5-minute clip from a show or podcast you listen to. Just speak naturally, explaining what you understood. Then, listen back to your own recording. This self-assessment allows you to objectively hear how much you actually understood and how clearly you could articulate it. It provides a tangible measure of your progress, which is often a fantastic confidence booster. Your superhero self-talk will have real, audible evidence to back it up.
That's a brilliant idea, listening to your own summary. Now here's a pro tip. You just mentioned recording ourselves summarizing. How specifically does hearing our own voice explaining what we understood help boost confidence in our listening ability?
Recording yourself summarizing what you heard after short listening clips is incredibly powerful for confidence because it makes your comprehension tangible. When you listen back and hear yourself clearly explaining the concepts, recounting the story, or using the new vocabulary you just heard, it provides concrete proof that you did understand. It moves comprehension from a vague feeling to a demonstrable skill. Hearing your own progress, how you can successfully process and then articulate information you just listened to in English, will significantly boost your confidence and concretely show you how far you've come. It's tangible proof of improvement that's hard to argue with, even for your inner critic. Use simple apps like voice memos on your phone or Audacity on your computer to record, and then maybe review your summaries weekly or monthly to track your improvements. It gives your superhero confidence a clear upward trajectory. Okay, now that we've truly delved deep into these 7 common listening problems, really peeling back the layers of why they happen and exploring practical strategies for how to tackle each one, let's just zoom out for a moment. Let's consider some long-term strategies. the bigger picture for achieving genuine listening mastery. Think of improving your listening skills, as I said, like training for a marathon. It's a journey, not a destination you reach overnight. You certainly don't expect to run 26 miles comfortably on day one of training, right? But with consistent, dedicated effort, applying these strategies patiently over time, you will absolutely cross that finish line. You become a true listening champion, confident in your abilities. It requires a marathon mindset.
That's a powerful analogy, the marathon mindset. So what are these evergreen strategies, these guiding principles we can follow for sustained improvement on our long-term listening journey? Maybe a top 10.
Okay, let's try 10 key strategies. First, create a consistent listening routine. Dedicate 10 to 20 minutes every single day to active listening. Consistency is more important than duration. Keep it fresh by mixing up your content. Podcasts one day, audiobooks the next, YouTube videos, engaging in conversations. Variety helps maintain interest and exposes you to different styles. Second, use authentic, real-world materials. Once you've moved past the absolute beginner stage, intentionally shift your focus toward the kind of English real people use every day. News broadcasts, movies, authentic vlogs, podcasts for native speakers. Overly simplified learner materials won't adequately prepare you for the nuances and complexities of real-life English your superhero ears need to master eventually.
Okay, routine and authentic materials. What's next? Something more interactive.
Third, engage with interactive content when possible. Try apps like LinkQ or Audible, especially using features where you can listen and read along simultaneously, as this reinforces connections between written and spoken words. Platforms like Duolingo or Memrise also offer structured practice that often includes interactive listening exercises, which can be great for reinforcement. Fourth, always practice listening for gist, not perfection. Train yourself to identify and capture the main idea or the overall message, rather than getting caught up on trying to understand every single word. A great way to practice this is to frequently pause and try to summarize what you've just heard in one concise sentence. This trains your brain to focus on the core message, which is a vital skill for avoiding overwhelm in fast or complex speech.
Listening for gist, not every word, that's freeing. And connecting with actual people.
Essential. Fifth, connect regularly with native speakers. Use platforms like italki or Proply to arrange conversations, even short ones, with native speakers or qualified tutors. Even just 15-30 minutes of real conversation per week can make a truly substantial difference in your listening comprehension, fluency, and overall confidence. It gives your superhero ears crucial, real-time practice. Sixth, track your progress consciously. Maintain a journal, whether it's a physical notebook or a digital one, using apps like Notion or Evernote. Record what you listen to, maybe note down new words or phrases, and briefly reflect on what you understood or found challenging. Reviewing this journal monthly allows you to visibly see your growth over time, which is incredibly motivating.
Tracking progress is so important for motivation. What about the types of things we listen to?
Seventh, diversify your input constantly. Don't just listen to news or just comedy. Listen to a wide array of genres. News reports, in-depth interviews, stand-up comedy, compelling storytelling podcasts, documentaries, maybe even reality TV. This broad exposure will familiarize your ears with varied speaking speeds, different tones and registers, and a much broader range of vocabulary and cultural references, training your superhero ears for absolutely any scenario. Eighth, set specific, measurable goals. Don't just vaguely say, I want to improve my listening. Aim for clear, achievable targets like, this month, I will watch one movie entirely without subtitles and aim to understand 70% of the plot, or I will understand 80% of this specific podcast episode by listening 3 times. Specific goals keep you highly motivated and provide a clear measure of success, driving your progress forward much more effectively.
Specific goals, right, and linking listening to other skills.
Yes. Ninth, combine listening with other skills actively. Pair your listening practice with complementary language skills. For example, after listening to a podcast, practice writing by summarizing its main points, or practice speaking by discussing what you heard with a language partner. This integrated approach reinforces your learning on multiple fronts, making your overall language ability stronger and more connected. And finally, 10th, perhaps the most important, stay patient and maintain a positive mindset. Remember, improving complex skills like listening is a developmental process that simply takes time and consistent effort. There will be plateaus and frustrating days. Acknowledge them, but celebrate every small win, consciously maintain a positive attitude toward your learning journey, forgive yourself for mistakes, and consistently keep going. Persistence truly is the key here to unlocking your full superhero listening potential.
That's a fantastic set of long-term strategies. Patience and positivity are definitely key. Now, to truly supercharge your listening skills and help you apply these strategies, we've put together a curated list of some awesome resources packed with great content for your superhero ears, starting with some recommended podcasts.
Okay, for everyday conversation and practical English tips, definitely check out All Ears English. If you're looking for short, clearly spoken themed episodes that are perfect for beginners and intermediates, 6-Minute English from the BBC is consistently fantastic. To understand common everyday phrases and slang explained simply, The English We Speak, also by the BBC, is invaluable episodes, are super short, just a few minutes. For really engaging storytelling that also helps you practice understanding emotional tone, This American Life is an excellent choice. And for hearing personal stories, often with clear speaker transitions, which is good for group listening practice, we recommend The Moth.
Great podcast list. And for YouTube channels offering that helpful visual component, a visual feast for your superhero eyes and ears.
Okay, for a focus on a British accent covering pronunciation, vocabulary, and common mistakes, English with Lucy is a very popular and well-regarded resource. If you're more focused on mastering an American accent, with incredibly detailed deep dives into connected speech, rhythm, and intonation, then Rachel's English is an absolute must-watch channel. For fun, sometimes live, conversations focusing on vocabulary and natural expressions, try English Addict with Mr. Steve. For lessons designed to be immersive, often simulating real-world scenarios, Speak English Now can be very beneficial. And for clear, well-structured teaching suitable for learners at all levels, English with Emma is another highly recommended and reliable channel.
Lots of great YouTube options there. And for apps, maybe making learning feel more like a game or fitting it into small pockets of time.
Yes, apps are great for that. LingQ is excellent for combining listening and reading with a huge library of customizable content, letting you import your own text too. For getting specific feedback on your pronunciation and doing targeted listening exercises, SpeechLing is very helpful, often using real human coaches. ELSA Speak uses AI to focus specifically on helping you master tricky English sounds and improve your overall listening discrimination skills. For long-form listening practice, Audible with its vast library of audiobooks is superb for building stamina. And for interactive listening exercises embedded within broader language lessons, especially for beginners, Duolingo is a popular starting point.
Good variety of apps. What about some helpful websites, those online treasure troves of learning information?
Definitely. BBC Learning English is a comprehensive site offering tons of free courses, videos, articles, and podcasts for all levels. ESLpod.com provides excellent podcasts specifically designed for learners, and crucially, they come with full transcripts and explanations. For a massive resource covering idioms, phrasal verbs, grammar, and various listening exercises, usingenglish.com is fantastic. And to practice listening comprehension and vocabulary through popular songs in a really fun, interactive way, check out lyricstraining.com.
Using songs is always fun, and for movies and TV shows, making learning feel less like studying and more like entertainment.
Absolutely. For light, natural dialogue packed with common slang and everyday humor, Friends remains a classic choice for intermediate learners. If you're aiming for more formal British English with very clear pronunciation and complex sentences, The Crown is an excellent, though challenging option. For fast-paced modern humor and lots of everyday American slang, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is very engaging and fun. Stranger Things offers contemporary American English with a good mix of teen and adult dialogue, plus some regional variations. And for getting exposure to Australian English in a charming, family-friendly context, the animated show Bluey is surprisingly great for learners.
Bluey, great suggestion. And finally, for connecting with real people, practicing conversation, and putting all your listening skills to the ultimate test, language exchange platforms.
Yes, these are invaluable. Tandem allows you to easily find native speakers from around the world to partner with for voice or video chats. HelloTalk is similar, offering connections via text, voice messages, voice calls, or video, with a large global user base. For finding structured one-on-one lessons with professional teachers or informal tutors who can tailor sessions to your specific needs, italki is a very popular and solid platform. And if you're looking specifically to find tutors for targeted listening practice or accent coaching, Proply is another excellent resource with a large database of tutors you can filter by specialty and nationality.
That's a fantastic list of resources covering all bases. Wow. This deep dive has truly shown us, I think, that improving your English listening skills is genuinely a journey, not some quick sprint to a finish line. Every single time you engage with English, whether you're listening to a song on the radio, watching a show on Netflix, or just chatting briefly with a colleague, you are actively training your ears step by step to catch more and more. It's all about empowering your inner listening superhero, bit by bit.
Exactly. The challenges we've explored today, Those tricky accents, the speed of fast speech, the gaps in vocabulary and idioms, the chaos of group conversations, understanding subtle tone, overcoming distractions, and even managing that confidence sapping anxiety. These are all incredibly normal hurdles that almost every single language learner faces at some point. It's part of the process. However, the good news is, with the practical strategies we've discussed, the real-world examples we've looked at, and the extensive list of resources we've just shared, you can absolutely transform those hurdles from frustrating obstacles into effective stepping stones on your path towards listening fluency and confidence. Your superhero ears are definitely ready for the challenge.
Absolutely. So the message is, grab your headphones, pick a fun podcast or a captivating movie from our list, maybe one you haven't tried before, and just dive in. Start applying some of these techniques today. Make sure to celebrate the small wins along the way. Learn to laugh off the inevitable mistakes, because they will happen. And most importantly, keep pushing forward with enthusiasm and curiosity. Remember, each listen, each conversation is a victory in itself.
And perhaps leave our listeners with this thought. The next time you encounter a new accent that feels difficult, or you find yourself in a rapid-fire conversation that starts to feel overwhelming, what's the first practical step, based on what we discussed today, that you'll consciously take? Not just to understand the literal words, but to really try and grasp the full context and the underlying nuance of what's truly being said. Consider that intentional action you can take.
That's a great closing thought, because before you know it, with consistent practice and the right strategies, you really will be catching more like a seasoned pro. You'll be understanding conversations, whether you're chatting effortlessly with a Londoner about the weather, following a heated online debate with clarity, or thoroughly enjoying a stand-up comedy special without missing a single punchline. And if you found this deep dive helpful and want more insights and learning tools, please do like this video, share it with fellow learners, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab YouTube channel. Your support helps us create more content like this. Happy listening.